and a faulty chair. It's funny, I was gonna do it a lot earlier today, but I realized it was all out of black shirts, and so I did my laundry because I wanted to be able to edit all these together into one cohesive video at some point. Only to, in the time I was washing my clothes, went out and got a haircut. So we'll see. We'll see how well these things edit together. Let me turn everything on here. Okay, so you can see Max is looking pretty good here. After much confusion, finally got his arms on correct. They're, they're pretty expressive, although I do still need to trim them. I think I'll hold off trimming anything until I'm completely done. It's still, the hem down here is still open, and I still have this open because I haven't done the tail yet. But I'm going to do the tail right now, I think. So, how I usually do it, let me get a piece of paper. So how I usually do a tail is I usually take this wire. I think this is 12 gauge or 14 gauge. Or I'll use armature wire. And here's a picture of the real Max's tail. So this is what we're trying to do, this curly tail. So usually what I do is I take this wire and I bend it like into a big T, and then run the wire up like this all the way back around, and then cover the whole thing in tubing. So that way it's not sharp and hopefully won't put some kid's eye out. And then the tubing would go on like so. However, this time I've been thinking about these doll joints that I've been trying to get rid of because I don't like these stoppers. And I was thinking today that I might be able to get away without having to make one of these by sandwiching this in and then drilling a hole through the post after it's all put together. I don't want to put that on because I'll never get it off. Put that on there, secure it into his rear end there, and then drill a hole through and then run this through and then thread the whole thing up and then cover it in tubing. And I might try that just to see how it works, or maybe not. I haven't decided. I haven't decided if I want to do this or not. Number one, then I'll have an odd number of eye joint or doll joints, and that might get me later. But the other thing is it might spin, which I think might be a problem. So maybe I'll just do it the way I always do, and I'll get experimental the next time. But it's good to get experimental because you find new ways to do things when you get experimental on these things. Okay, so I need a fair amount of wire here. And armature wire might be a little bit better, but this is what's in Tilly. Eddie has a spring. It's actually a spring off of one of those punching nun toys. It's what the neck is held on by. So when I was scavenging that for another project, I took the spring off and I put a cork in it. So he has his little tail's pretty stubby. So in here is just a spring. So in theory, it actually would wag pretty well, but I never get a chance to do that. The other thing that this dog is going to have is legs that are attached. So I am going to put those on with doll joints. This is Eddie's leg. And aside from the color change, it's basically the same. He has a chip clip in here that just basically attaches to the edge of his leg, or edge of his body here, and keeps it in place. I'm just going to use a doll joint there instead, so it's on there permanently. But you can kind of see how his legs going to be if it's gray. I'm also going to change the haunch on this so it looks more like a dog's leg. Eddie's are a little thin and they look a little creepy. But I never use his legs, so I'm not worried about it. All right. Let me chop off some of this. I'm just guessing how much I need. But I've done a few of these, so I kind of know. So I basically just make a little T that winds around. Try and make it as neat as possible, although it doesn't really matter. I just want to, the big thing I want to do is I want to make sure these are all closed once it's all done. Let me zoom in a little bit. I want to make sure these are all closed in so that I can run a whip stitch around here to tie it to his inside lining. And then I also want to make sure that it lies flat so it won't poke the puppeteer in the wrist or in the arm, wherever it falls on him. And after I posted about changing that pattern to for the arm, I was actually out last night. Dave Baker saw that realized that I had gotten confused and turned it around, and so everything I did was wrong. So I went back and I adjusted it, and I still don't know if it's 100% right. I may have to revisit that pattern if and when I rebuild Eddie, because it may still be wrong. But it's fixed on the puppet, so I'll put off fixing that until the next time I need it. Okay, so I just basically made this little cross thing. You can see. I'm gonna and then get a piece of tubing. This is probably the wrong stuff to use, but it doesn't really matter. I have a lot of little pieces of Teflon tubing that I'll never use for anything else. So I think his tail is going to be, about that long. So I'm going to make this tubing a little bit shorter than that. Okay. Actually, I'm going to make the wire just a little bit shorter. Feed that on there. Cut off the excess here. And this still may put somebody's eye out, but it'll be a little less apt to do so. Okay, so that's basically what I drew right here as the tail. And then what I'm going to do, actually, see, I left this all open. I even have marked there that T for tail. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually sew it right into the right into the butt here, right like that. You could even poke it through, but I don't know if I'll do that. I think I'm just going to tie it off. Needle and thread. I actually had some armature wire, but I used the last of it on that Miss Piggy, so I'm all out of it. I'm gonna push all these together so I have something that I can kind of sew into here. And this is exactly the way I do all the antennas and all the tails on all these dogs has something similar to this in place. And I've never had a problem with it until somebody tells me, oh, you're having a problem with it. Okay. It's not even particularly symmetrical, but it just has to do the work, do the job. Okay. I'm just using this black thread, so hopefully I can see it a little easier. And because it's inside, it's not really going to matter. So this all started because when I was doing the original Melon Pole puppets, I used some. I had a hard time figuring out how to do the antenna, and the antenna, I knew I wanted them to stand up, but also be soft enough that they didn't like impale somebody. And so what I did was I was working I was working at DirecTV, and we had a St. Patrick's Day event. Can you see that? Had a St. Patrick's Day event, and as a perk, we were all given these St. Patrick's Day headband things with 2 shamrocks on it. And I realized they were about the right length for the antenna on Mayberry. And so what I did was I got as many of them as I could. I think I got about 8 pair. Took all the shamrocks off. And then sewed them on. I knew that the headband that came with it wasn't strong enough to be good enough to keep those things in place. So what I did was I started making these little wire T things, and they only went up. They didn't go up the whole length of it. They only went up about 1 inch, and it was enough to hook the spring from that headband from those little shamrocks, and also attach them to the foam in the head. And so I did that, and that was the beginning of it. But then I didn't want it to look like a spring, so what I did was I started making these tubes out of jersey that were like big socks that went over the spring. And so that's kind of what I'm going to do with this as well. I'm going to make like a furry sock that'll become the actual tail. I'll tell you what, I'm going to make sure this is in the right spot before I sew it completely down. I'm just going to peel this all back. I'm just basically tying it all off. And this is going to stay in place from sewing it to the outside as well. But I'll do that after the covering is on. And I've never had a problem with it coming loose, so this will probably be the first one that does come loose. I tell you what, this Dry Fast or reticulated foam is so easy to sew into. And it doesn't tend to tear. It tends to cut really well, but it doesn't tear as much as regular upholstery foam. It's also lighter, which is why I like to use it. And it hides seams better. I know that a lot of people say that it breaks down faster, and maybe it does, but as long as you don't have it in the air, I've never had a problem with it. I think this is just as easy as using the doll joint. I was just trying to do something new. And I do think that I would have had a problem with it spinning in there. So I'm going in between the loop of fabric, just trying to tie it down. And I'm, again, not doing the best job, but I'm not doing the worst job either of it. So. I'm tying it off about every inch, like I was talking about in the other thing. So if it does break, then there will be several knots keeping it in place. Now, one of the things, and I probably should have checked this, is I have a tendency to put the tails on a little too high sometimes. So I should have checked that before I put this on, but I'll move it before I sew it up if it is in the wrong spot. Part of me thinks maybe I could get away with moving it down and then looping this around and folding it under so it's a little bit more secure. But let's see. Let's see what it looks like. I think actually the tail is going to be in a pretty good spot. So thankfully, I actually had to move Eddie's down about 2 inches after I had him together for a while because it was coming right out of the middle of his back. Believe it or not, this and the nose and the rods and the way I do the hands, the arms, those are the things people always ask me about when I show them the puppets I build. I don't know why those are the things. Maybe it's just things that people struggle with and don't have a solution for, and so they wonder how I did it. But this video may have given away all my secrets here. Oh, that and what Mayberry's eyes are made out of, because they're these huge things. I've been trying to post these every day. I'm going to eventually get to the point where I have a set schedule for when I do it. So I guess if you guys think it would be a good, if you guys can suggest some good times that I could be posting these, that people will have time to watch them, I'll try and hit that. I'm on Pacific time, so just keep that in mind. Just so I know what time you're actually saying. Like if you say 3 o'clock and you mean 3 o'clock Eastern, I want to know. Ouch. At some point, I may get demonetized for stabbing myself repeatedly when I do this sewing. But that's not now because I don't get money for this at all. Okay. This should be all tied off now. Okay, so here's his little possum tail. What happened here? This out of the way. So now at least he has a tail. You kind of see, and you get a little bit of move. Oh my god, all this hair. Get a little bit of movement out of it, but you'll get a lot more movement out of it once I put the actual fur on there. But I'm gonna do it the way I did the body. I'm gonna pattern it first. So I could pattern this straight, and I may do that because it might be easier. But I do know it's going to have a seam on the top. I also know that it's going to be a little bit longer than the. Maybe I'll give you a view that you can actually see what I'm doing here. Let's see. So I'm just pinning this up right now, just along this thing, and I'm also going to pin kind of the curve that I know is going to be in it. Actually, you know what? It might just be. Ouch. It might just be this. So I'm going to draw one here. And I could probably machine sew this, but I'm not sure, number one, that the pile won't get messed up. And also, I'm not sure that the that I could turn it, because this, like I said several times, this doesn't have any stretch to it at all. Okay. So that'll be my tail pattern. Although it's pretty true already. All these doll joints everywhere. So I use these file folders because this is what VJ used a lot. But I was very lucky in that the office next door to me was just throwing these things out. They had a whole big box of them. So I've used up almost all of them, but I probably got 400 of these things for free. So one more thing to be on the lookout for in the trash are these old file folders, because they make great patterns. Provided they're not, like, covered in muck. Okay, I'm just gonna. Well, I was gonna do it the wrong way, but I'm gonna do it the right way here. Yeah, see, it's pretty symmetrical. Yeah, it's fine. I was gonna trace it going the other way too, but I think I'll be okay. I keep looking for things to do with this part of the, because I have so many of these things, but I don't know if they would stand up. Maybe I could make eyebrows out of them or something. Kind of put fur over them and make an eyebrow. I don't know. And I usually find where this matches up, which I'm way off. I'll kind of try and push it right in the corner and see how close I can get to it. Still way off. Oh, boy. Doing a bang up job here. Okay. Okay, here's the other way I do it sometimes. I will just cut one side and then try to line it up. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to straighten this out. Make sure there's not a good point. I'm going to cut that off. I'm also going to mark the center line here. So now, when I put this on the tail, it'll be like that, and then when it's curved, it'll cause it all to go out like that. So oh, hey Charles, how's it going? Have you done any work on that nose? Just a second, I'm getting some fur. So I should have plenty of fur left over for the legs. And then that's all that's left on this puppet, so which is great. I want to make sure that if I can, oh, I cut it the wrong way. All right, let me cut one more piece. I wanted to make sure that I had enough fur going the right way. I think this will do it. Put this in a situation that you don't see my bald spot, and you can see it. Okay. I did the nose and added the first layer of glaze putty, sanded it, and put on the second coat. I'll do more tomorrow. That might be enough after you get it sanded, but I do think it does smooth it out quite a bit by using that glazing putty. It's pretty easy to work with too. The biggest thing is having enough patience to wait for it to dry in between sandings. Because otherwise it'll kind of roll up on you. That husky dog you made is really cool. I just saw it today. Okay, so here is the tail. I'll sew all that up. I'm just going to pin it right now. It's basically just going to be like a big sock that goes over the thing I just made, the armature. Now when it's curled, it kind of has that look that Max has, the real Max has. I may want to make it a little bit longer because it's kind of, yeah, no, I think that'll be okay. Yeah, it's usually good to let it sit for a couple hours. Sorry about that. I think it says you can sand it within 30 minutes, but I think a couple hours is probably more realistic, especially if you're in a wetter area. Yeah, I think I can sew that up. And the beauty of it is I don't actually have to sew it up on the form, so it should be a little easier to sew. Like I said, I'm not sure that I can turn it if it's completely done backwards like this, but I think I can turn some of it. Let's see. Let's see how I do. Yeah, a lot of these things are just things I kind of figured out along the way. If it helps somebody else discover some other way to do it, great. At least, they can have a starting point, maybe thinking about it a little differently than I did, Okay, I think I'm going to try whip stitching it to this point. Ah, this fur. I would love to be able to get this whole puppet done tomorrow, but I'm not 100% sure I can get the legs done in one day because I do have to use the plumber's epoxy on it, and I want to make sure it's completely dry before I move on to the next step. So I may only be able to do the armature tomorrow, and then I'll do the finish on Friday. But then I'll be done. So, except maybe the trimming. But I'd love to be able to get this thing in the mail by the weekend. Maybe I'll do a couple videos with him over the weekend and then send him on his way. The most popular video I've done is that Miss Piggy outtakes. And I kind of think maybe that'll be my new thing, is every time I finish a puppet, I'll try and say just one little thing and end up posting all the outtakes from that. Yeah, I love those ducks that you make, and I think I may have to try and build a duck at some point. Or something like a duck. I think at some point I'm going to build the Jar Jar. or a General Grievous, one of those two. using mechs similar to the duck stuff. The good news is, now that I've finished this part, I can actually sew up his back. And I've just messed this up, I think. I can sew up his back, and then as soon as I get those legs in place, I can sew up the hem at the bottom. Oh boy. That knot is going to be a mess. I don't even know how that knot got in there. I do not know. I'm not sure if I can salvage this, but I'm going to try. You're really going to change myself? What am I to change? Oh, you do a pretty good piggy voice. I was shocked by the piggy voice. I had never even tried it before, other than just saying one thing. The only thing I would say is, "Don't you dare!" That was all I could say, and I never tried anything else. I think the only other thing I tried before that was, "That's enough about you. I'll talk about moi." And then I'd say, "Don't you dare!" And I did that all during when we'd film anything. Like, we would go in between takes, we would either do that or we do like a really bad Fozzie, all of us. And it wasn't until I actually started making that video and trying to come up with something to say that I ever tried to say anything else. And I thought it was pretty funny that it was as good as it was, because I had, for 25 years, I had just said that one little thing. My go-to Muppet voice has always been Scooter. Like, I go, oh, challenge myself. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'll challenge myself. I always try to challenge myself on these puppet builds. That's really the only fun I get out of them, is challenging myself to do something else. But usually that challenge is trying to flat pattern or something. My go-to Muppet voice is Scooter. I'll do that for you. It's like, "My uncle who owns this theater sure isn't going to like this." That's the voice that I usually do. Like disguising their car so they won't be recognized. So any of those other voices is just crazy. But that's really close to what I do for Mayberry too. So, like, "Genius, the man's a genius." That's Mayberry. And then Scooter is, "Genius, the man's a genius." I think every puppeteer does a bad Kermit the Frog. I think every puppeteer does a bad, or bad to good, maybe. What are some of the other voices that people do? They have that monster voice. A lot of puppeteers I've been around do that same monster voice, like, kind of the Bobo. Oh, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Or Rolf. Hey there. Can't live with him, can't live without him. I don't do a very good one, but I think that growly voice is kind of one that a lot of puppeteers do. See, this is why I'm doing these things right now, these little videos, is because I'm so uncomfortable on camera. 2 weeks ago, I couldn't have done this, just goofing around, doing these voices on camera. Hopefully, I'll get a little bit more at ease as I go along. I love that voice you used with that husky. I totally sounded like Wallace Shawn, which is great. I mean, it's good that you don't do particular voices. I think that's a problem that a lot of puppeteers have, is they all do the same voices. I used to do a lot of voices, like I do Jinx the cat from the old Pixie and Dixie cartoons. That's another voice I'll do, which is, I hate those Mises to pieces. Those pesky Mises are plotting something, I think. That's a voice I'll do, but I don't use it for a puppet. What are some other voices I do? I used to do Christopher Lloyd a lot. I used to do Gilbert Gottfried into Peter Falk. There's another voice I do. But they always kind of inform what I do for, my voices all start as a bad impression of something. I think my Mayberry voice started as a bad impression of, well, I know where it started. It was a bad impression of Get Smart that I just took the accent out of. Missed it by that much. And then it turned into, missed it by that much. and Eddie is Frasier. I do kind of, God, I can't even think of what. I'm a therapy dog, as you know. I am a therapy dog, and that's basically me doing Frasier. Practice makes perfect. Yeah, I've always had a problem where I just get so up in my head when I'm on camera that I can't do anything. Like, I'll be great before I start rolling, and then as soon as I start rolling, I just can't do anything. So I think that doing these little live streams is helping me. I felt like doing Zoom all through the pandemic helped me a lot. It got me as good as I am, which is still pretty terrible. But okay, here's the moment of truth, whether I'm going to be able to turn this burrito or taco or whatever this thing is. Tie this off pretty quick. I think what I'm going to do this week, because my shop is fairly clean right now, I'm going to do a video where I just walk through and show how I have it laid out. Because I saw somebody on one of the, I think it was on the Puppet Nerd forum, talking about his workspace and how it always gets messed up. And I think we all should show the way we're working, the different solutions to small space. I'm only in it's a second bedroom, and I think it's 12 feet by 14 feet, maybe. And I have a lot of stuff in here, but I also wanted to have it set up in such a way so it looks like a little studio. I'll tell you what, this chair is something else. It gets higher as I go. But I have it kind of set up with all these tools around here and a little workspace. And I'd love to see how other people have solved these same problems. Okay, let's see if I can get this thing turned. This is what I use to turn everything. This sewing fork, cooking fork, because it's blunt and it doesn't have a cap that's going to come off, and it's not going to poke through. And I don't do a lot of cooking, so it gave its life so I could turn fabric. I'll also put these in because I got to get to a little point. Okay. All right, let's see how this. So yeah, I think when I get that all sewed up, which I'll probably do off camera because I'm starting to get hungry. I'm getting a little peckish. I'll get that sewn up. But that's how I handle tails a lot of the time. Let me tie that, pin that in place. And then what I'll do is I'll tack it down. I'll tack it down around here at the base, and then tie this shut or sew this shut, and then I'll keep it in place. And I think that when I perform it, or when Kenneth performs this, I think you'll be able to do a lot with that little tail. So he's starting to come together. And I don't know what his voice is going to be, but I think he's got a lot of personality. And when he's trimmed up, he'll look a lot more like the real Max. So anyway, I'm going to pop off now. I'm trying to do this every day and trying to learn how to look right down the barrel. But hope you enjoyed it. And I'll see you next time. Do more bad Muppet impersonations.